Cheating has been around forever in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. It's long been something the community despises, and Konami themselves have taken many steps over the years in attempts to thwart it. Heck, it's even been portrayed countless times in an extremely negative light in the various Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series. But ultimately, cheating can't be completely stopped no matter how much you try. It's sort of like that old saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way, and unfortunately, cheaters always seem to evolve just as the rules do. I once made a video cataloging some of the biggest instances of real-life cheating in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! But today you're gonna learn exclusively about numero uno, the king of cheats, the real-life Bandit Keith of this game, his successes, his failures, and the public scrutiny he faced very often. I must warn you, there may be parts of this video that some find upsetting. This is the story of Yu-Gi-Oh's most notorious cheater, Roy St. Clair. Roy St. Clair began his Yu-Gi-Oh journey at the young age of 16. Roy was from Greenbelt, Maryland, and started off in the DM era by playing at local card shops. As someone who also started playing Yu-Gi-Oh around this time, I can tell you that the regional circuit wasn't in full swing during 2003. This meant that Roy was initially limited to local competition. As luck would have it, Roy also got into Yu-Gi-Oh alongside his older brother Brian St. Clair, so at least he would always have someone to play against, whether or not he can make it to locals. By 2004, however, Upper Deck had gotten a regional circuit rolling, and Roy was absolutely hooked. In 2009, Roy told Konami in an interview that in his early days, he and his brother would try to go to every regional possible, and that it was a great experience. It wasn't just the competition and dueling he loved, but he also liked traveling to new places, meeting new people, and making friends along the way. While Roy was having a blast traveling and attending events, those close to him, like his brother, saw firsthand how good he was at the game, and that fun wasn't the only reward that Roy was reaping. Roy was without a doubt a natural talent, and one could even say a prodigy of this game. I say this because in his first full year of playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, Roy miraculously became the #1 ranked player in the entire United States. As impressive as that sounds, it probably wasn't Roy's largest accomplishment during those DM era years. Roy was a tremendous competitor, and his philosophy was fairly simple. Play the best deck, build your deck as good as possible, and then test the crap out of it. Never worry about losing, only worry about getting better and smarter each time you play. This may sound unbelievable, but Roy wasn't just the #1 ranked US Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist in 2004. He was also a top-notch Versus player. In fact, he followed up his #1 Yu-Gi-Oh! Ranking by, in 2005, becoming the top-ranked player in the Versus system trading card game constructive format. Being the #1 ranked player in two completely different major trading card games should have made Roy feel like he was on top of the world, but it wouldn't come without controversy and a price. Roy's first major suspension wasn't actually because of Yu-Gi-Oh, but rather the Versus TCG. Roy was at a $10,000 Versus tournament that also featured large qualifier events. According to Roy, his brother Brian, and a friend Alex, after winning his match, Roy walked around the venue when he spotted Alex playing a game. Roy approached the ensuing game thinking his friend Alex and his opponent were playing a casual non-tournament battle. Alex was in the middle of a move when Roy casually said to another one of his friends, Paul, Alex made a misplay there. At this point, Roy was immediately asked by judging staff to leave the area. Alex ended up winning that game, but before the start of the next round, was approached by judges telling him that they were overturning the last round's results and he would be receiving a loss. Upper Deck's side of the story was quite different. According to Upper Deck judges, not only was Roy's act of saying aloud, Alex made a misplay there, completely unacceptable, but they also accused Roy of collusion, saying that on 4 separate occasions while watching the battle, Roy signaled to Alex by doing things such as grunting, shaking his head, or lifting his hands. Roy was immediately disqualified from the 10K tournament and lost at least $2,000 in guaranteed prizes as he was already in the semifinals. Upper Deck also suspended Roy for 90 days for entering any Upper Deck tournaments. This included Yu-Gi-Oh events. Roy was absolutely livid, and not just because of the prize loss, but he also knew that he would no longer be able to enter the 2004 US Yu-Gi-Oh National Championship, which ironically was being held the next day. Roy accused Upper Deck judging staff of singling him out, saying that Upper Deck judges had brought up his Yu-Gi-Oh credentials when speaking with him. Roy claimed that he overheard one of the judges say, quote, "He's a high-profile player, let's make an example out of him." These events led to a highly adversarial relationship between Roy St. Clair and Upper Deck judging staff. Now, I don't generally assert my personal opinions into these videos, but in my opinion, it was highly suspicious that Roy would claim not to know his friend Alex was playing in a tournament game when, by Alex's own admission, they entered these events together earlier that day. I also found it suspicious that Roy was watching the game standing behind Alex's opponents and facing Alex. Lastly, Alex even admitted online in a post on Pojo that he clearly heard Roy's remarks in their ensuing game. So even if you assume that Roy was completely telling the truth, that could have potentially changed Alex's course of action during his turn. The one silver lining out of the entire situation is that Roy would still be allowed to enter the 2004 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship because it was technically a Konami hosted event. The grinding that Roy had done to become the top-ranked Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist had finally paid off, and he qualified through the point system without even having to attend the US Nationals. Roy tried to make the most out of his trip to Worlds, which was held in Los Angeles, California, and finished tied for 4th place. It was an impressive showing, especially considering Roy did better than any duelist who earned their invitation through Nationals, and that included the great Terasak Poonsabat. After Roy served his suspension, he returned to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Looking to prove how good he truly was. At the first Shonen Jump of 2005, both he and his older brother Brian made pretty big statements as they both made it to the quarterfinals. Despite dueling each other often, they opted to run fairly different decks. This would be Roy's biggest accomplishment of the year, but in 2006, he really turned it up. Roy started out the year by coming within an inch of the Shonen Jump Orlando Championship in March. As one of the bigger names in the tournament, Roy took his grindy control deck and pushed it straight to the finals, where he was upset by Michael Lux in Game 3 as Mike top deck snatched Steel to seal Roy's fate. Looking to immediately bounce back, Roy entered Shonen Jump Baltimore less than a month later and made it to the quarterfinals before losing to the eventual winner and champion Shane Scurry. However, this time around, Roy went completely off the rails and played a Chaos deck that revolved around Zombra the Dark and Deck Devastation Virus. He had half a dozen easy to summon targets within his deck, and he knew that Deck Devastation could be an auto win button under the right situation. Performances like this not only showed that Roy was again a top tier duelist, but it also showcased his excellent deck building ability. These reasons and more are why Roy was chosen to headline the juggernaut Team Hunger Force in 2006. This team consisted of names like Brent Yetter, Ivan Flores, Brian Long, and Chris Pateo, who all won Shonen Jump championships during GX. Roy was now a member of and surrounded by arguably the strongest team in the TCG. Sadly, Roy simply would not be able to sustain his GX success, and it's because of objectively dumb decisions. During Roy's hot streak at the beginning of GX, there were tons of cheating accusations levied against him from the Yu-Gi-Oh! And Versus communities. Huge threads on sites like VersusRealms.com claiming Roy had started games in the top cut before letting his opponent cut his deck, alleged statements from past teammates saying Roy had taught them how to perfectly stack any 5 cards to the top of their deck, even Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists claiming Roy would often start a game with 5 cards rather than the standard 6, then call a judge over saying that the opponent had drawn an extra card. There's even a crazy story about Roy once dueling a girl who has the life point lead advantage after turns in time. The story goes that the girl was relieved that she won when Roy jokingly asked to play it out for fun just to see who would have ultimately won the duel. Roy proceeds to gain the life point lead during the next turn when a judge walks by and asks who's leading in life. The girl responds, "I already won, we're just dueling for fun," only to have Roy state, "I have no idea what she's talking about. As you can see, I clearly have the life point lead." Stories of Roy's cheating escapades were starting to have a reputation equal to his competitive one. The thing is, however, there was never definitive proof. That was until one fateful regional in College Park, Maryland. At this particular regional, Roy was caught red-handed deck switching. As Roy sat down before the round was to begin, judges selected him for a random deck check, only to discover that the deck he had handed to them was completely different than the deck list he had turned in. Many in the community suggested that Roy was playing 2 decks to reduce the possibility of running into an unwinnable matchup. Also, in case you're wondering, not submitting your deck for a random deck check is grounds for automatic disqualification and an unsupporting conduct suspension. Roy was soon given a suspension for cheating and a sentence of about 3.5 years. His friends proclaimed his innocence saying that Upper Deck hated him because he won so much. Roy also went on a short online tirade saying, quote, "Who cares if I cheat? Guess what? All the pros do it," unquote. Actions like this, as well as Roy's suspension for cheating, made the Yu-Gi-Oh community immediately question all of Roy's accomplishments, as well as his former title of #1 ranked US duelist.
Punk, I'll teach you to respect my title.
I believe Roy went on this tirade because he never expected to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh again and was frustrated by the over 3-year ban that he had received. Luckily, fate smiled on Mr. St. Clair once again. After Konami forcibly took control of the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG in early 2009, they lifted all Upper Deck suspensions on Duelist. Basically, everyone got a get out of jail card, and that included Roy. I can't say that he came back leaner, but he definitely returned meaner, motivated, and sharper than ever. Remarkably, Roy once again hit the ground running as he entered the 2009 United States Championship and finished top 4 playing Blackwings. In my opinion, this was absolutely shocking and incredible, especially considering that for such a long time he had not played competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! This led Roy to once again be invited to the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship in 2009, held in Tokyo, Japan. For the second time, Roy held back nothing and came closer to winning it all than ever. Roy thoroughly impressed, finishing in 3rd place. However, his epic 5Ds run was just getting started, as just a few short weeks after Worlds, Roy made top 16 at Shonen Jump Austin, Texas, while playing a unique skill-drained zombie deck. Within a few months of being back, not only had Roy competed in the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship for a second time, but he now had multiple tops and proved that his superb deck building skills hadn't left him. In the next year of 2010, Roy was hitting on all cylinders, and X-Sabers may have been Roy's true calling, because in 2010, he was arguably the best X-Saber duelist in North America. Roy had an extraordinary year, as he came in 3rd at Shonen Jump Nashville, then placed 2nd at YCS Toronto. As high-flying as Roy was, predictably it wouldn't last. In February 2011 at YCS Dallas, Roy had once again topped with X-Sabers. However, at day 2, at the top 32 deck checks, Konami judges found the bottom corners of all 3 copies of Roy's side deck Fossil Dynas had noticeable bends. Judges claimed that these were the only cards in Roy's deck to have this distinguishing detail, and thus it would be easy to stack said cards. Roy defended himself in a YouTube video claiming that the members of the judge staff had initially said the cards were okay, saying that, quote, "they were perfectly fine because they were in mint condition," unquote. This time, Konami and not Upper Deck was handing out a pretty harsh penalty and suspension to Roy for cheating, although not as severe as what he had received in the past. This time, Roy would serve 2 years. Many would have simply quit at this point. As Roy even stated in his video, he believed Konami was trying to weed out successful older duelists of the past.
And like Konami doesn't know what they're talking about. They just don't want like great players like me and some of the better players. All the best players. They don't want repeat like greats. They just want like new people to get in the game, get better.
However, that just wasn't in Roy's DNA. Roy served out his 2-year suspension and was eligible to return in February 2013. How would he return from a second multiple-year suspension, you wonder? As it turns out, pretty sharp and pretty motivated, just like in the past. Roy immediately cashed in with a top 16 finish at YCS Austin with Karakuri. Roy clearly took inspiration from Desmond Johnson's top 4 build, playing the same deck at YCS Miami earlier, but Roy adjusted his build to his particular playstyle and the expected meta with tech like Macrocosmos in the main deck. All these years off, and Roy was still quite a good deck builder. This would basically mark the end of the line for Roy St. Clair's dueling career. He would have one more YCS top in 2015, 2 years later when he made it all the way to the top 16 playing Clifford at Columbus, but there would be no third Miracle Run the Worlds in this story. In fact, Roy's story actually has quite the sad end, as he tragically passed away just 3 years ago in 2017 at the young age of 30 years old. In the end, I'm not sure that there's one broad consensus on Roy Roy St. Clair in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. With all the accusations, suspensions, and stories, I think it's pretty clear that he was a habitual cheater. He's been called the Ric Flair of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the dirtiest player in the game, and to be honest, this guy probably wrote the book on cheating in trading card games in general. But on the other hand, I personally believe he was one of the smartest and most talented duelists this game's ever seen, as well as the fact that he's probably one of the best deck builders in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. He's without a doubt very infamous, but I think that he's just as equally iconic. I think I'll close this video out by saying Roy wasn't perfect, and he certainly was no angel, at least not in terms of this game. He played fast and loose with the rules all the time, but he was still an icon in my book. And more importantly, he was one of us. He was a passionate Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist who loved this game. I want people to understand, this guy spent almost 6 full years banned from Yu-Gi-Oh! On 3 separate occasions, but he never gave up, and each time he came back and started winning like he had never left. Roy, if you ever see this video, I hope I told your story well.
重戦士ガルーダ拷問機械に攻撃だバトル元全米ナンバーワンの肩書きが泣いてるぜうるせえこのガキ